Well, folks, we will bring you the state of the race momentarily. First, a reminder, we are now 41 days away from the most pivotal election of our lifetime. The truth has never been more critical. With Daily Wire Plus, you get uncensored daily shows from the most trusted voices in conservative media, live breaking news, hard-hitting investigative journalism. Don't wait. Subscribe right now at dailywire.com/subscribe and stay informed. Well, again, this race is tight as a tick. It turns out that despite all of the media's attempts to pretend that this race is somehow a blowout for Kamala Harris, there is literally zero evidence that that is the case. Today, Politico has a piece that must be somewhat devastating for Kamala Harris, suggesting she really didn't get any sort of bounce out of that much ballyhooed debate with Donald Trump. Now, as I said at the time, I didn't expect that I thought she was going to get a big bounce out of it. I thought it was a blown opportunity for Donald Trump because there are only so many times in this campaign where Kamala Harris will be forced to actually answer questions about her own positions, about the things she has done as vice president of the United States, about her belief system, and Trump didn't effectively press that attack. But that did not fundamentally change the race. I said, even at the time, a week and a half from now, it ain't going to make one bit of difference. That is now clear. According to Politico, Kamala Harris did not get much of a post-debate bounce. Instead of taking a clear lead over Donald Trump, the polls have shifted only slightly in the vice president's favor, especially in the battleground states, even though voters overwhelmingly crowned her the winner of the high-stakes showdown. It's nowhere near enough to change the underlying reality. Harris and Trump are still on a collision course for a very close finish in November. And when you look again at the polls, what you see is that virtually every state is inside the margin of error. According to that Real Clear Politics polling average, Donald Trump has a 2-point lead in Georgia. He's almost certainly going to win Georgia, in my estimate. He is tied with Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania within a point. In Michigan, she's up by a couple of points. In Wisconsin, they're within a point. In Arizona, Trump is up by a couple of points. Nevada is basically a dead heat at this point. Those states are really tight. Plus, of course, North Carolina, which has turned into a real dogfight for Donald Trump. So this election could spin on very, very small numbers. And there are a couple of lagging indicators for Kamala Harris that are not particularly good. So yesterday, for example, CNN's Harry Enton pointed out that this New York Times poll that showed that Donald Trump was winning in North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia showed that she's actually lagging in terms of support from Black and Hispanic voters, which is a disaster area for her.
How about this? I think this is really interesting. All right, choice for president, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. All right, Hispanic voters. 4 years ago, Joe Biden won that vote 66% in the Sun Belt. Look at where we are now. Kamala Harris at just 52%. So Kamala Harris struggling among Hispanic voters. Donald Trump doing considerably better than he did 4 years ago. How about Black voters? Kamala Harris, again, leading here by a significant margin, right? She's getting 83% of that vote, but that is significantly short of Joe Biden's 92%. So the bottom line is, in the Sun Belt, which is much more diverse than the northern battleground states up in the Great Lakes, Kamala Harris is struggling among voters of color.
Okay, this is a real problem for her. There are a couple of unspoken problems for the Kamala Harris campaign. The Democratic matrix that has been built, the sort of logical electoral matrix that has been built since 2012, which is drive out minority votes and then count on suburban white ladies to bring you over the finish line. Kamala Harris is trying to do that, but she's trying to do so without mentioning her race. That is a very big problem for her. You can see why she's trying to do that. She doesn't want to lose Joe Biden's somewhat heavier blue-collar base. Joe Biden had some blue-collar white voters in 2020 that, for example, Hillary Clinton did not have in 2016. And so she's trying to retain that base, but she is bleeding that base overwhelmingly. The Teamsters do a poll in pretty much every swing state, and every single swing state shows that Joe Biden, who is leading Donald Trump by 20 points among the Teamsters, now that Kamala Harris has replaced Joe Biden, she is trailing Donald Trump by 10 to 20 points among the Teamsters, which means there is, I think, a quiet male rebellion against Kamala Harris's candidacy. I think it's not so quiet in some places, but I think there are a lot of men who look at Kamala Harris's campaign and the way that she has degraded men into some sort of beta male, Tim Walz, Doug Emhoff subservience, and they don't like it very much. And so I think there are a lot of men out there who are saying that they are undecided on this election, who actually have decided that they're voting in favor of Donald Trump. So when you see polls that show Kamala Harris winning women by a huge margin, but Donald Trump only winning men by sort of a mid-margin, I don't think that's right. I think Trump is going to do much better among men than the polls are currently showing. And because Kamala Harris is attempting not to alienate blue-collar white men, again, she wants to hold some of Joe Biden's base, particularly in those swing states. This election, like pretty much all the others, is going to come down once again to the blue wall states. It's going to be about Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Michigan is her best state. Wisconsin is her second best state. Pennsylvania is basically a dead heat at this point, which we'll get to in just a minute, because now they're pulling out all the stops. And I think the most egregious way I think maybe I've ever seen in a campaign. It really is kind of astonishing what they did yesterday. Truly amazing. Unprecedented, as far as I'm aware, in the history of American politics. What they did yesterday in Pennsylvania. It's kind of amazing. Break glass in case of emergency kind of stuff. Okay, but Kamala Harris, in an attempt to win over blue-collar white men, has been downplaying her race in this campaign, which, again, I think is probably better for the country. I think the sort of racial polarization ushered in by Barack Obama in 2012 has been horrific for America. You can see it in the polling data. Race relations in America were on an upward trajectory until about 2012, 2013, and then they immediately plummet when Barack Obama opens that can of worms in an attempt to get himself reelected. So I'm glad Kamala Harris isn't talking about race very much on the campaign trail, but it is true that because she's not talking about race, she is not earning as much black support or apparently Latino support as she otherwise might be. Kamala Harris, folks, is not running a very good campaign, but if she were the president, the economic situation that would follow would be significantly worse. We're looking at a proposed top income tax rate of nearly 40%, a 7% hike in corporate taxes, and she has said she wants a capital gains tax on unrealized gains, which just means pretty much every business in America is in serious trouble. Wait, there's more. They also want to add almost $2 trillion to our already staggering $2 trillion deficit every year. It's like they're trying to speed run the collapse of our economy. Now, I know you're thinking, how can I protect my hard-earned money? Well, good news. This is where our trusted sponsors at Birch Gold Group come in. Birch Gold can help you convert your existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA. That is correct. A tax-sheltered, inflation-resistant golden ticket to financial security. And here's the kicker. You don't pay a penny out of pocket for the conversion. Look, I've been working with Birch Gold for years. They're the real deal. They understand that in times like these, you need to take control of your financial future. So here's what you need to do. Text the word Ben to 989898. You'll get a free info kit on gold, no strings attached. And listen up, because this is important. This is the final month for you to get your hands on a limited edition 24-karat gold-plated truth bomb with qualifying purchase. That's right, folks. Time is running out fast. This is your last chance to not only protect your wealth, but also to own a piece of financial truth. Don't miss out on this golden opportunity. It's disappearing faster than common sense in D.C. Text Ben to 989898. Claim your eligibility before September 30th. In a time of high taxes and high inflation, protect your savings with gold from our friends at Birch Gold. Text Ben to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. So she's lagging with white men, and apparently she's lagging with blacks and Latinos in these polls. Well, that's not a recipe for victory in a very, very close election, in a turnout-based election. Now, maybe she is counting on the fact that she is radically outspending Republicans. Democrats are outspending Republicans basically almost 2-1 at this point. The campaigns, political ad spending in the United States, including presidential, congressional, and down-ballot races, the Democratic campaigns to this point have spent about $700 million. The Republicans have only spent about $390 million. Republicans are getting shellacked in the spending race. The spending by outside groups, Democrats have spent $1.1 billion. Now remember, we were supposed to believe that Citizens United was a right-wing decision by the Supreme Court that allowed outside groups to manipulate American politics. Remember, Democrats have been complaining for years that it's these outside Republican-funded super PACs that are deciding politics in America. It's not true. Unions have been spending billions of dollars for Democrats for as long as I've been alive. Democratic super PACs spend a ton of money. In fact, again, they are currently spending $1.1 billion to outside groups in this election, compared to about $915 million for Republicans. In total, Democrats have spent in this election cycle $1.8 billion. Republicans are stuck at $1.3 billion. And most of the spending is, of course, concentrated in the swing states. So maybe the Democrats are hoping to outspend. And one thing that's fascinating is that Democratic super PACs are not focusing on Trump anymore. They've decided, they've squeezed all the blood they can from that particular stone. That everyone who's voting in favor of Kamala because they hate Trump, all those people are God. So what they're instead focusing enormous amounts of energy on is trying to create a phenomenon around Kamala Harris. And this is where, again, they have a problem. Kamala Harris is a nothing burger. She's a giant nothing burger. She's always been a giant nothing burger. She moves where the prevailing winds of Democratic Party opinion move. She tries to read the tides and then ride those tides. So in 2019, 2020, when the Democratic Party was moving in a very Bernie Sanders, Black Lives Matter direction, she campaigned as left of Bernie Sanders and left of Black Lives Matter. And then, when there was a backlash, she suddenly turned into Queen Moderate, who actually was an aggressive prosecutor. She wasn't. In California. According to Politico, Democratic super PACs are taking an unusual approach in this year's presidential race. They're not focusing on former President Donald Trump. And the significant majority of this cycle's spending by pro-Democratic outside groups, which typically function as attack dogs, is going to head to aiming to drive positive perceptions of Kamala Harris. That stark contrast reflects a challenging reality. Harris began her abbreviated campaign comparatively unknown to many voters, setting off a frenzy to define her in the final weeks of the election. That's particularly pronounced because this is Trump's third presidential run in a row. There may be little Democrats can do to persuade most voters about Trump. Instead, since Harris's elevation, according to Politico, Democrats have bet that their dollars are better spent reintroducing voters to the vice president. Which, of course, means, as I've been saying, the Trump campaign has to be focused laser-like on characterizing Kamala Harris. This campaign must be made about Kamala Harris. The same math that was always true holds true now. If this election is a referendum on Trump, he's going to lose. If this election is a referendum on Kamala Harris, she is going to lose. It is up to the Trump campaign, outside super PACs, conservatives, to make this election about what Kamala Harris is and what she will be. That's the entire ball of wax right now. That is the thing that matters. Well, you can tell that the Democrats are in a bit of a state of panic at this point, which is quite amazing because really they should be riding high. They've had nothing but glowing media coverage of Kamala Harris since they swapped out one candidate for another in the most shocking presidential move of my lifetime. And everybody just pretended that it was totally fine. It was totally normal. 0 votes earned by Kamala Harris in any primary ever. And here she was, the nominee. Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States, was deemed too senile to be the candidate, but yet not senile enough to be ousted from the presidency. And this is all the new normal. This is all treated as normal. You would imagine under the circumstances in which the Democrat media human centipede continues to operate unmitigated, that she'd be leading by 5 to 10 points and that she'd be running away with the race in the swing states. And that, in fact, is not the case. That is actually not a thing that has been happening, which means they're now pulling out all the stops. So yesterday, this is a shocking story. It truly is an amazing thing. I've never seen anything quite like it, actually. Apparently, according to the Associated Press, under tight security, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Sunday visited a Pennsylvania ammunition factory to thank the workers who are producing one of the most critically needed munitions for his country's fight to fend off Russian ground forces. Representative Matt Cartwright, a Democrat, who's among those who met with Zelensky at the Scranton Army ammunition plant, said the president had a simple message: thank you, and we need more. So he's supposed to speak at the UN General Assembly annual gathering in New York on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then go to Washington, D.C. to hang out with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But instead, the United States flew him into Pennsylvania. That is bizarro world. Apparently, they actually sent like a United States C-17 to pick up Vladimir Zelensky and fly him into Pennsylvania. Well, that's weird. I feel like there's something going on in Pennsylvania. What could it be? Could it be it's the most important state in a swing state election? That basically, if Pennsylvania goes Democrat, Harris wins, and if Pennsylvania goes Republican, Trump wins? And so they're now flying in a foreign leader. The Democrats are. I mean, it's the White House. They are literally flying in a foreign leader to Pennsylvania to go hang out with Josh Shapiro, a surrogate for the campaign, and the person passed over for VP because he's a Jew. They have him now running around the state of Pennsylvania, basically campaigning in favor of Biden-Harris. I've never seen anything like this. You talk about foreign election interference. Democrats said that in 2016, the Russians were intervening on behalf of Donald Trump. And the evidence they had is that the Russians had some cutouts who were trying to retail information to the Trump campaign, information that never materialized and was never used. And then they said that, it's the Russians on Facebook. The Russians on Facebook. They were putting up all sorts of memes. And it turned out that the amount of engagement earned by the Russians on Facebook was less than my own personal Facebook page during that election cycle earned in 1 month. During the entirety of the election. So it's not the Russians interfering. Well, this is foreign election interference, like on its face. This is insane.